Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our TDevConf speaker interview series. My guest this evening is Brian Korzynski, who goes by Korz from Detroit, Michigan. Brian, how are you, sir?
Pretty good. How about you?
Oh, I am busy. You are number 3 of 4 today. So I had 2 this morning, and then I've got chat after this. So that's gonna. But I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So thanks for giving us some time this evening. Before we begin, I want to make one quick commercial announcement. Um, Tomorrow morning at about 8:30 or 9 Central Time. I don't think last I looked he hadn't posted a time, but he told me about 8:30 or 9 Central Time. Our friend Chris Gardner down in Huntsville, Alabama, he has taken DevSpace virtual this year. Normally DevSpace would be, I think actually it was supposed to be tomorrow and Saturday, the 11th and 12th, in person, but of course that's not going to happen. So he's going to be doing it live on Twitch. So all you need to do is go to the TDevConf Twitch channel tomorrow morning, and you can get a full day of great content for free. You can also go to devspacecomp.com or visit them on Twitter at DevSpaceConf. All right, so Brian, I've got we know each other pretty well, and so we can probably have a conversation for a lot longer than 30 minutes. We have in the past. But one question that I am asking everybody, just so that the interwebs can get to know them, is give us the 60 to 90-second elevator pitch about yourself.
Okay. By trade, I'm a .NET developer. Been doing that now for a little over a decade, about 12 years. More recently, over the past couple years, I've been focusing a lot of my energy into machine learning, especially into neural network or natural language processing using neural nets and deep learning. So I've been kind of intermingled between Python and C# really in depth over the past several years, and really enjoying it.
So yeah, and machine learning is what you're going to be speaking about at TDevConf. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, just some kind of easy warm up information about yourself. So, what was your first computer?
My first computer was an IBM 8088. It was from 1980, which actually predates me by 5 years. It had no hard drive, dual 5 1/4 floppy drives, dual monitors, one monochrome, and the other color, 8-bit color. So I was actually able to play games like Pressure Luck and Tonka Goes to Town and all kinds of fun stuff when I was a kid. So that's what really got me into computers, was doing a lot of that stuff back, messing around with it way back when. That's how I got to learn DOS really well, and that kind of led me into the programming route.
So you actually had a dual monitor back before it was a thing, a dual monitor system before it was a thing.
Yeah, it was one of those monochrome ones. You turn it off and it's still green for like the next half hour or an hour.
I never had one of those, but I saw them. Yeah, my first one was a TI 99 4A, so I predate you by a number of years, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
No, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I think so.
At what point did you realize that you could control this machine and you could make it do what you wanted it to instead of just what somebody else told it to?
Well, I kind of fell into programming. It's not something I necessarily was seeking out. I had spent a number of years doing like help desk, and I always thought that I was going to go into like being like a network engineer. Mm-hmm. And I signed up for an electronics class in 9th grade of freshman year of high school, and the class got canceled because I was the only one that signed up for it. But they're like, well, you've been doing this help desk thing, at the school for like 5 or 6 years now. Why don't we just put you in the sophomore programming class and see how you like it? So I went into that class. I was doing VB6, which kind of shows you a little bit how old I am. And I actually really, really started enjoying it. So I continued doing programming all throughout high school and then into college. And so I kind of caught the bug, if you will, from that class.
Well, it's interesting, you're talking about VB6 was your first language, and Well, actually, most of the people I've talked to, it's been something like Apple Basic or Quick Basic or something like that. And like I said, I was talking to your neighbor, Chris Woodruff, or your in-state neighbor, let's put it that way, Chris Woodruff last night, and he was talking about his first experiences and everything. And a lot of people might say that people more recent, and especially in the past, say 10 to 15 years, have had it much easier. And Chris actually had an interesting perspective, is that actually it might have been easier 30 years ago, because people were able to know everything. And in today there's so much, it's impossible for anybody to know everything. When you were learning VB6, did you feel like it was overwhelming, or was it the excitement of, hey, look at all the stuff I can do?
Yeah, it was kind of more of the latter. I really started enjoying it, and I agree. It was kind of the thing where you could get your head around the entire breadth of it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now, you got like web development versus mobile versus cloud, and even like cloud, like what cloud vendor, and every vendor is different. And yeah, so I definitely would say it was more of the latter, where you could get in and really learn it, because that's the thing I love about VB or Visual Basic, was that you could design your UIs and write your code at the same time. So you're doing both parts of it. You're not like just writing some backend code and throwing it over a wall to like a UX designer or something like that.
Right. So you see it end to end. Whereas today, you talk about something that nobody can possibly get their head around completely. Look at Azure. Look at Azure. It's a fantastic product. I use it every day, but to be able to be able to know what all the services are, much less know how to use them, because it spans so much, is going to be really, really difficult.
One of the things I would say too about why it would be easier back then is I think the programs were a lot more simplistic.
True.
And didn't do as much as they do today. I think the expectations and stuff today, and not only having to know all that, but the expectation that your code is reliable, scalable, deployable, extensible, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think like there's so much more you have to put into software today than you would have if you're a developer like 30 years ago.
No, I agree. And also today you've got you've got things that go beyond the actual code. So you have the aesthetics, you have the interaction, because back then everything was terminal based, and today we talk to our machines, we use gestures. And so it's definitely all of this great new functionality has kind of come at a cost in some ways. I guess you could say. So this will be another interesting question, since you come from more of a newer generation. I'll ask you this: what is your favorite code or text editor that you've used?
That's kind of a loaded question. So it depends on the job I'm doing.
Okay.
So for example, if I'm doing like non-programming stuff, like I use Sublime, which is a Python-based text editor. And that's where I'll keep a lot of my notes. That's where I keep track of like my hours and my timesheets and things like that. If I'm doing, Visual Basic, or if I'm doing not Visual Basic, I'm doing C#. Obviously, my go-to is normally Visual Studio. If I'm doing Python, it's a mix between like Jupyter notebooks and Visual Studio Code. So to me, a lot of it depends on what I'm doing, because I have different tools for the tasks that I'm working on. So I don't know if that's kind of like a loaded. If I had to pick one, I guess it'd be like Sublime, because I use that a lot for non-development stuff that's related to development, such as like taking notes and having it be my place of my source of truth for all my notes and requirements and things like that.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people mention Sublime, but say I used to use Sublime. But actually, I think you're the first one so far that has said that they actually still use it. About everybody has gone to Visual Studio Code for everything. So, like I said, that's one of the things that's been really interesting for me, is seeing all of I'm seeing every single perspective from everybody that's being interviewed. So it's interesting to hear that. How would you? I guess maybe what we should do first is talk about. Well, no, we'll go ahead and do this. And so, you are a machine learning engineer. How would you? And this is going to be a really interesting answer. How would you explain your job to an elementary school student?
That's actually really challenging.
Yeah.
So machine learning. So typically, the way that I would do it is I would more or less explain what a programmer is. I wouldn't necessarily try to explain like artificial intelligence to like a 5-year-old. Um, and basically, what I would do is I would tell them it's all about problem solving and figuring out a solution to solve a particular problem. And then I would give them examples. Such as let me think of a good example I can give. Um, like maybe I could teach them like how to apply like some of their math they're learning, like fractions and things like that, and then use it as a way to show them like, yeah, all this stuff you're learning in school is not just just for the sake of learning it. It's actually very applicable, because one of the things that's really interesting about me is that I kind of really struggled in math in like middle school. It wasn't until ninth grade, when I was taking programming, where I was learning algebra and programming at the same time, that it
Right.
all really started to click for me. Because learning programming at the same time as learning algebra, it gave me a way better understanding of algebra and the ways that you manipulate equations and things like that. But it also made me understand programming a lot better because I was learning the algebraic concepts at the same time, like variables and assignment and
Mhm.
manipulation of equations and things like that. So one of the things for me that I think is really valuable, and like this is something I'm actually helping with my niece do, is I'm teaching her a little bit of programming because she's struggling a little bit of math. So I'm trying to help her out with that and try to show her like how you can write programs to help solve the equations and why a lot of the stuff matters.
And that's interesting. You're talking about that synergy between algebra and programming, and one helping you understand the other. It's also something that Rob Richardson, when I interviewed him this morning, he was talking about similar concept, but also how learning Node made him a better C# developer, actually, and such. But no, that was I definitely agree that. But no, I definitely agree that the whole idea of problem solving and breaking things down into smaller, but also telling them, hey, you are going to use this stuff, and maybe here's how you will be using this stuff in the future. Such especially some of the more what are going to be to elementary school students, younger people, the more abstract topics such as mathematics.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and dig into your talk, machine learning in C#.
Okay.
So go ahead and give us kind of again the elevator pitch on that, and then we'll
Okay.
see what comes from there.
Yep. So one of the things about this is the job I'm currently at. We are doing a document classification system, but our company in general is a .NET shop. So one of the things that came about is this project that came up, and we had to keep it all in C#. We couldn't do cloud because of the sensitivity of the data. So basically, what I had to do was I had to start do what every good developer does: go to Google. How do I do machine learning in C#? After spending hundreds of hours and finding very basically no results, um, it was very challenging. So part of the reason why I wanted to write this talk is nobody really talks about doing machine learning in anything other than like Python or R. So I wanted to show people that there are other tools and stuff out there. And if you're already a .NET developer, and you're looking to take on like a machine learning project, I wanted to show people some of the tools that are available to them, and then talk about things like AutoML, talk about how you can build your models using different frameworks, talk about how you can port models from Python and consume them in your C# applications, and all that kind of stuff that's around machine learning, primarily because nobody's really talking about this. And I could see this being a huge value for people that kind of really know C# pretty well, but are trying to get their feet wet they know C# really well, but trying to get their feet wet in machine learning. So that's where the basis of this talk comes from.
Now, when you learned the concepts of machine learning, did you do that while you were building up your own libraries, or did you start off and learn the concepts in Python or R?
So machine learning is something that I learned at conferences years ago. So that's, first where I started learning it. And then, so basically I learned like the concepts of it, like what is supervised learning, what is, unsupervised learning,
Mhm.
what are the different types of problems you can solve, learning those kinds of basics. And then throughout the course of it, through the course of Google searching and stuff, everyone's like, use Python, do this,
Right.
do this. So yeah, I would find, tutorials and articles and read through those and, try the tutorials out, understand the practice and what the concepts they're trying to teach with the article are. Because I feel like a lot of it, you have to do it in order to understand it.
Mhm.
And like, that's the thing with machine learning too, is that it's not really like, it's more of like an art than a science, right? There's not like this is how you do machine learning, and I can distill all the knowledge in like an hour, and now you can go write any type of machine learning, right? Because as you know, it's very difficult. Even doing images or whatever, image classification, there's 1,000 different ways of doing it. And even if you're using like the same type of network, like let's say an inception network, you could use pre-trained models, you can train your models from scratch, depending on the image sizes that you're going to be working with. So there's always like stuff around that. And to me, like that's the biggest thing, is you have to like mess around with the samples to actually truly understand what they're trying to get at.
So, so your talk. I mean, you've got an hour at TDevConf.
Yep.
You got a room, then you got to leave time for questions. So, when coming into your talk, if somebody has no, maybe they know a little, they sort of know, like they could describe machine learning in 10 seconds, but after that, they are they're kind of kind of the details of how those concepts work. Are you going to go into that, or is it going to be more or less, hey, what machine learning is, and now here's how you implement it in C#?
Yeah, so I'm going to approach it from being like a more of an introductory level, and
Okay.
a lot of the focus is going to be on like auto ML. They're using things like ML.net, and then use that as a tool to show them how to solve certain types of problems, and then provide them with examples, and then talk about the different frameworks and how you could utilize them, and then provide code snippets. So like I'm still trying to get everything in the correct order of how I want to present it, but the majority of the time is going to be centered around some more of the auto ML and some of the automatic ways of doing machine learning, so that anybody could pick it up and start using it.
Now, what is the auto ML? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so auto ML is not an implementation. A lot of people think it's like it's an implementation, but it's more of a concept. Auto ML stands for automated machine learning, and there's different implementations of it. Google has one. I think it's Fast AI. And there's one in C# called ML.net. And basically what the premise is you tell it the data, and you might describe some things about the data, and then it figures out how to build and train models for you. And then you can write code that will do machine learning tasks without you having to be knees deep in machine learning.
And that's something that I see as a developing trend, because you've got things like Auto ML, and you've got the Azure Cognitive Services, and things like Azure Machine Learning Studio, and where these things because machine learning now, you can't avoid it, and it's getting to one of those things where it's almost expected. And guess what? That's another one of those areas that we were talking about earlier. Applications do so much these days that you can't get your head around all of it. What do you think of in these self-service type of the self-service machine learning that we're beginning to see? What's your take on that?
I think there's a lot of good offerings, but a lot of them might be specific to certain types of problems. So, for example, cognitive services, they actually cover quite a bit of offerings in there. But like, for example, one of them would be the custom vision API, and that would be like doing image classification, where you could feed it images of turtles and giraffes, and then it can build a classifier automatically and do like object detection within an image to classify whether it's a turtle or giraffe for you, without you having to do any coding. I think that's one of the coolest ones that's out there. There's a lot of other cognitive services that have things built into it, such as like there's the built-in one that does like, is there a house, is it a person, is the person smiling? There's also things for like forms recognizer, which is really cool, where you can give it like an image of a form and it can do targeted OCR and actually extrapolate data, like key data points off a form using machine learning. And a lot of those I think are really powerful and really, are really starting to gain a lot of ground. The problem is there's not machine learning as a service for everything that you'd want to do.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where some of the auto ML stuff fits in, because there's not like ML for tabular data by default. There's not ML as a service for natural language processing for like doing document classification. So a lot of that stuff you would either have to piece systems together, or hopefully somebody will eventually come up with one that will do that.
So our friend Chad Green, who will be coming up directly after you, is sitting in the chat, and he said, "Hey guys, love Brian's shirt. I think you have a Codepalooza shirt on." So we'll give Chad some marketing there, because Chad is kind of my inspiration for doing these interviews, because he did them for Codepalooza. I had a question on the top of my head and I completely forgot it. It'll come back to me. So let's talk about something else while I try to think of my question. So outside of speaking at TDevConf, what do you do to make the community awesome? You're obviously a prolific speaker, but what else do you do as well?
Yep. So as you mentioned, I speak at conferences. I put on a local user group, which I highly recommend anybody that doesn't attend user groups to attend user groups. They provide food and you get an immense value out of it. You get a lot of great content, and it's a good way to keep your axe sharpened every month. So I'm really involved in that kind of thing. I'm starting to work on a couple open source projects that are not currently posted yet. So I don't really want to go into too much detail on that. But I'm starting to do some open source software as well.
And I actually remembered my question, because one of the things that ML.net is fantastic, but there are also other libraries out there, and you've talked. I've heard you talk a lot about the SciPy or the SciSharp, the SciSharp stack. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's called the SciSharp stack, and basically what it is, it's a port of a lot of the common frameworks and tooling for doing machine learning in Python, such as like TensorFlow, Keras, NumPy, Pandas, OpenCV, and the list goes on. But it basically allows you to write that kind of code that you would normally write in Python, but allows you to write it in C#. And some of those you can use, like NumPy, for example, you can use without having to have Python installed. Same thing with TensorFlow, but like Keras you'd have to still have Python installed. So one of the things I'll talk about too in my talk is something called Onyx, and Onyx is something we use a lot, and it basically is like think of it as like a universal format for a model, and then we could write our models in Python, port them to C# and run all our do all our inference in C#.
So now I've looked through these, and one of the things that kind of stuck out to me, I have not really used them to the extent that you are. So this is why it's kind of a question of personal interest on my part. But one thing that I noticed is that such as with NumPy and TensorFlow, they mirror the APIs of their Python counterparts a lot, and so what you've got is you're writing C# code against a rather Pythonic API. Have you found that to be kind of a paradox at any time?
Yes and no. I mean, when you're in C# mode, it's a little awkward.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of used to it because I also write a lot of Python. So for me, it's awkward, but I'm used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cool things about the SciSharp stack is, let's say that you're someone who's just starting off in machine learning and you want to get, you want to do something that's a little bit more advanced than what the AutoML might provide.
Mm-hmm.
you learn those libraries and code it in a language you're already familiar with, and build models and stuff without having to take on yet another thing to learn. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing like C# over Python if you're just trying to start off and you don't already know C#. But if you already know C# and you know it like the back of your hand, and now you're trying to do some machine learning, it kind of bridges that gap and makes it easier. And it also acts as a way where, like, if you wanted to build it in Python, you can consume it in C#, if that makes sense.
Right, because I guess what I'm getting at here is that C# developers, I mean, C# is an object-oriented language. You cannot get around, well, with top-level programs coming out soon, you can sort of begin to bypass that.
Yeah.
But C#, pretty much all C# developers today, they expect objects, and that's what ML.NET gives them. Gives you an object for everything. Whereas, with TensorFlow.NET and Pandas.NET and all those, because what I'll do sometimes when I'm doing my ML.NET talk is I'll take an example in, say, NumPy and an example in NumPy.NET, and they're almost exactly the same.
Yeah. If you actually look at the documentation on their their GitHub page, they've matched the syntax and stuff like almost a 1-for-1, like almost 100% verbatim. And it's more of like a DSL, like a domain-specific language they built on top, so that so you can kind of write the code against that framework using something that's more Pythonic, if you will. Whereas some of the ways you would call methods and pass parameters and things like that would not necessarily be the way you do it in C#.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I'll talk about too is during my talk is the differences between them and like what I would do to more or less what I would say is encapsulate the weirdness, like how I would like write interfaces and encapsulate that code so that when you have non-standard code, like non-standard C# code in a C# project, you put that in the spot and all the code in there is that inconsistency, and then you'd write interfaces and stuff around it so that way when you're consuming those, like for example, let's say that you write a classifier where you're training a model and doing prediction. That code would be in that Pythonic C#, if you will, and then you'd write interfaces and stuff around it where it just consumes it in like just native C#. So like, for example, one of the things you'll see when you look at that is one of the most glaring things is that we use Pascal casing for method names in C#, but a lot of the method names are not Pascal case necessarily. Some of them are, just a snake case. Some of them are, camel case. Some of them are, whatever different case, depending on the frame or the library you're consuming.
True, and yeah, in that casing, the style is important. So, now so we talked a lot about what you do professionally, and I've asked a lot of people this question. And I always say this is kind of a loaded question because the question is, what do you do outside of work/tech? And the problem is that so many of us, we like doing this so much is that it is our life. But I'll go ahead. So what do you do outside of? I know outside of work, I know that you experiment with different hardware platforms, around machine learning and such. But what do you do outside of work or even outside of tech?
Yeah, so our family is really close. So we spend a lot of time with our family. So my sister lives like 3 minutes away. So we're over there almost every weekend, hanging out with my nieces and my sister and her husband and my parents. So our family is really important to us. So we'll get together and play yard games like Jards or cornhole. So there's that. Another thing I'm trying to do is trying to learn metal engraving.
Oh yeah, that's right. You showed me that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. I definitely got a long way to go. I've only been doing it since like December, or just after Christmas time. And yeah, I need a lot of work onto it. But it's something that's fun. It's also forcing me to learn how to draw a little bit, which is something I've always wanted to do, but I have always really struggled with. So that I spent a lot of time doing that.
Okay. Well, great. Well, we're almost up against time, and like I said, this time we do have this one. I do have a hard stop on. I want to get your closing thoughts, but real quick, I want to do again, like I said, a quick commercial announcement. This time for TDevConf First of all, we have a sponsors page up, tdevconf.com/sponsors.html. Please go and thank our sponsors. TDevConf would not be possible without them. If you want to get tickets, bit.ly/TDevConf 2020-tickets. They are free and going fast. TDevConf will be Saturday, October 3rd. That is 3 weeks from the day after tomorrow. Come visit us at tdevconf.com for all of the details and see about Brian and all of the other great speakers. And follow us on Twitter at TDevConf. Brian, any thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, so one of the things I would like to say is machine learning is definitely something that everyone's going to need to be knowing over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we're finally getting to a point where it's really usable for the average dev. So if you get a chance, check out my session, and you'll learn about how you can utilize some of these tools and maybe incorporate some machine learning into your applications if you're already using C#. Definitely go to user groups and conferences because that's how you keep up. That's the best way to keeping up with keeping your axe sharpened, if you will. So that's basically all I have.
All right. Well, Brian, we definitely appreciate your time this evening. Thanks for helping to make helping to make TDevConf awesome. Once again, my guest this evening has been Mr. Brian Korzynski. Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And don't touch that dial or whatever the equivalent of the dial on Twitch and YouTube is, because in just 15 minutes, we're going to have Chad Green. So stick around. See you later, everybody.
See ya.